Welcome to From Embers to Excellence, a podcast that explores the many facets of leadership from the perspectives of some amazing people. We discuss the triumphs and failures that have shaped our lives and our leadership philosophies. It isn't whether we fail that defines us, but when we do fail, how we respond. Leaders dust off the ashes and use their failures as fuel to work harder and as lessons to come back wiser and stronger, more resilient, more determined, and more committed to excellence. Today's guest is Dario Donahoo, an engineer, driver, operator with Orange County Fire Rescue and a close personal friend. Dario began his career in the fire service with Orange County in 2011. He has a master's degree in public administration from the University of Central Florida and is a major in the Air Force Reserve. He has served in some of the busiest stations in Orange County, and he was one of the people who helped me develop the curriculum for Orange County's leadership program. He has served in leadership positions throughout his time in the Air Force and Air Force Reserve. He's a veteran of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. As an active duty officer, he has been deployed 3 times. Those deployments took him to Afghanistan, Niger, and JPED, the Joint Personnel Effects Depot in Aberdeen, Maryland. Additionally, he has been one of my mentors and a voice of reason when I couldn't find it within myself. He is an amazing leader and a humble man who serves as an example for many men and women within the fire service and the armed forces. So, Dario, we've worked together for many years, and I've had multiple conversations with you regarding leadership. Let's start off hearing a little bit about your personal journey towards developing as a leader.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me as a guest. It's a pretty cool thing that you're doing. So hopefully I can do you justice. My journey as a leader. What I'll say is it first had to be with my dad because he was also in the Air Force on the enlisted side. He retired as a master sergeant. And so what I'll say to that is, as a military brat, we moved around quite a bit. And so no one really likes to move around as a kid. But because of that, it helped me to be really personable and to meet people and to be uncomfortable, to come out of your shell, to just be talkative. It kind of changed my personality with people. And so I would say it started there with my dad. And then as I came up through high school, or just growing up, period, I played a lot of sports. I played the basketball, I played football, I played baseball. And I think just being involved in team sports, I think it builds character in an individual. There's a lot of good things that come out of it, hard work, because when things get tough, are you going to stick through? But things like that, I think sports definitely added some things to me. It built some mental toughness. And then when I transitioned from high school, school, I say this to people, but like school wasn't for me. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the social aspect of it, but I don't really like school. But growing up in my house, my parents, it wasn't an option. It wasn't like if I was going to go to school, it was which school are you going to go to? So I heard that my whole life. And so I chose UCF. And so I think even that, my parents kind of instilling, they wanted something better, because my dad didn't graduate high school. He went back and got his GED. My mom, she did, and she was an RN, but like they wanted better for their kids. They wanted us to do one better than them. So I think that taught me something too. So I go to UCF, and again, I don't like school. I'm just there because that's just what I was supposed to do. And so I get there. I went there to play football, and I talked to the coach and stuff like that, and everything was good. But I get there, and I'll never forget this. I go out there to try out because I was a preferred walk on. I go out there to try out, and I felt like I was like a little fish in this big pond, because this is back when, it was like Dante Culpepper was the quarterback. This is back then, and these guys were huge. They were fast and strong, and they were just big. And I'm just like, man, I'm way out of my league. So I'll never forget this, that I went out there for either 1 day or 2 days, and I just stopped going, right? And I'm going to come back to that, but that me going through that and me feeling that way taught me that I will never ever feel that way again, because I sold myself short. And so as I was going through life, though, like I said, I love people, so I got a chance to talk to a lot of people, a lot of great athletes, and so I started to play intramural sports, and I can ball with them. And so it told me, like, I should have just stuck it out, and then I'm sure it would have played out differently. I don't know, but that's what I say to myself. But I think that helped me grow too as a person, going through that. I wish I wouldn't have gone through it, but I get the lesson now that I'm 40. And then, like I said, going through school, I had some hard times that first semester, and I think part of it was me not continuing with that the football team. I had a really tough first year. I mean, I had a partial academic scholarship. I lost it. I was on probation. I had like a 1.8 or something, or a 2. It was a 1.8. It was bad. My whole first year, I think my first year I had like a 1.9 I ended up with. And I was talking to my parents about it, and they were just like, quitting wasn't an option. So they were like, you need to just figure it out. So going through that, dealing with it, working through it, I ended up graduating with like a 3 or something, like a 3.1 or something, which was pretty good considering how I started. And then I think the next thing that helped shape me was 9/11. So I want you to picture me. I'm in college. I have a whole lot of hair. I mean, when I had long hair, it would come down to my shoulder when I had it braided. But I can remember I was in class that day. I came out of the class, and people would hang out at the student union. And so I remember coming into the student union, in the TVs. They had TVs in that in the foyer. I don't know if you've ever been to that student union, but the TVs were on, and they were showing the burning buildings, and I was like, "What in the world is going on?" And so as I'm watching the news, I'm watching the feed, and like I can remember watching it for about 15 minutes, and then I walked straight over to the ROTC building, and I walk in there, and again I had earrings, I had a huge amount of hair, and I walk in, I'm big baggy clothes. I walk in there, and I know the guy is looking at me like, "Son, just turn back around." But I go in there and I tell him that I wanted to join. What I got to do? And he was like, "Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to go get a haircut and take out those earrings, and then come back and see me." And so I knew when he said that to me, he thought I wasn't going to show back up, right?
Yeah.
I went out and got a haircut and came back the following day. And I think the lesson I learned there was like, it's like being selfless, and like there's things that are way bigger than you, right, in the world. And so I try to teach my kids that too, just being selfless and being a servant. As I'm growing as a man and as a leader in both the fire department and in the military, I know that people respect that about individuals, because I do that leadership quality. And so then as I'm pushing forward again, I get deployed, not deployed, I get stationed rather to Minot, North Dakota after graduating. And it took me 5 years to graduate. Again, I don't like school. It took me 5 years to graduate. But I did it. And out of all the places that they could have sent me to, they sent me to North Dakota, Minot, North Dakota. And so I'm literally going from, I graduated in December. I'm literally going from like, I don't know, in the wintertime, it's like what, mid 60s, roughly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here in Orlando. And then I get to Minot and it's no joke, wind chill is like -60. I'm not even kidding. And so that was a shock to me. And so I think what that did for me though is because that place, and it was a great place. It was a great place for people. The environment was kind of, I would say the environment sucked because it was so cold. But because it was so cold and there was nothing out there, legitimately, there was nothing out there, it made the people really come together like as a community. So, I mean, the nicest people in the world. And so I know what I learned about that is just even the enlisted folks and the officers, that relationship, you know, people talk about the fraternization in the military. It's a huge deal. You're not supposed to do it. But in locations like that, I'm not going to say, I won't say they didn't follow, they still followed the rules, but I think like no other place I've ever been to, the enlisted and the officers kind of, they were a little bit closer than normal because there was limited places to go. And so, but what that did was it helped me understand the enlisted people better. And so where normally, for example, if you know, one of my troops asks me or invites me to a party, I'd go and then I'd leave. I don't want to be around at the end because I know what happens the later you're at a party. Excuse me. So that's normally what I do. Well, there, it just is what it is. And so I got a chance to really have some really good conversations and spend more time with my enlisted troops. And so again, it just helped me understand them better, and it helped me be able to relate because, and like I'm sure you know, people are people. They're all the same. It doesn't really matter what color you are, right? Once you have a conversation with somebody, you see a whole lot more similarities than differences just by having a conversation. So I know I learned that at Minot, but going through it, again, it sucked. And it was only the weather is what I mean by it sucked. So then as I'm transitioning, I get deployed when I was there, and this is a long story, so tell me if you want me to shut up.
No, keep going. This is good.
All right, so when I was in the military, I get deployed. I volunteered for a deployment. And in this deployment, we went to, well, I went by myself because I volunteered for it. It was a onesie spot. And so I volunteered to go to Afghanistan, Kabul, Afghanistan, in a position, they called it a Joint Visitors Bureau, excuse me, the JVB. And so the best way to explain the position was, so when you have distinguished visitors, so like generals or congressmen or whoever, they'll come over, but before they come over, I'll be talking to their exec. And so they'll tell me what they want to see. I'll build an itinerary for them. And then I have a detail. I had a detail who would be like their security while they're here. Even though they bring their own group, we have our detail as well because we were well versed in the area. So we had our little detail to help navigate the place. And so, you know, everything leading up to that point helped me in that position, because in there I was a second lieutenant, and I have a direct report to a 2-star general, right? Who's on the base, and you know, I tell him who's coming. Let me tell you the story first. So it was my job to tell him who's coming. This guy's name was General Brennan. Really, really cool guy. So again, I'm a second lieutenant. I go up to him. It's my first week there, and I'm telling him, okay, I got General Petraeus coming. You know, General Petraeus, 4-star, huge deal. And I come in there. I'm nervous. I walk into his office. I'm stuttering and stammering, and I can't get the words out, right? And he's looking at me. You know how when somebody, you know, is stuttering and you're trying to help them, like you're doing this with your head. So he's doing that to me. He was like, LT, stop. He was like, listen, you have all the information that I need. You have that, and I need it. You got to give it to me. He was like, I need you to relax and just talk to me. Don't look at this. Don't look at my stars up here. Every single morning I get up just like you do. I roll out of bed. I have to sit up. I have to put my uniform on just the same way as you do. So he was like, I forgot what his first name was, but he's like, this is my name. I'm this Brennan. I need you to walk back out of my room. Let's try this again. I walk out and I'm like, all right. I go in there and I just start talking. And so that right there, that interaction with that general, he will never know this, but that marked how I speak to all of my superiors. And I just speak to them very direct, straight up. I just give it to them how it is, and most people appreciate it, right? But he created that space for me, and I wouldn't have had it if he wouldn't have done it. But back, so in that position I was in, is again, it's called the Joint Visitors Bureau. You know, it's kind of like the Secret Service. So when people came in, you know, the exec would tell me what he wanted to see. I'd create an itinerary, and then we go do it in country, wherever in Afghanistan, whatever he wanted to see, we go do it. And so again, it helped me. It helped me to be a planner in that position. You know, it helped me to talk to superiors in that position. And it helped me to think quickly, because with the General Petraeus, I'm gonna tell you this story too, because this one marked, it was a huge deal. So General Petraeus couldn't have been the first week when I was there. It had to be maybe about a month in. But we had like a cookie cutter itinerary, basically, like whatever we wanted to, you know, when people came in, we'll show them this, we'll show them this, we'll show them this, kind of cookie cutter thing. We probably had like 2 or 3 of them, kind of tours that we already had set up. Well, he wanted to see everything different. Nothing on our cookie cutter sheet. He didn't want to see any of that. So we really had to go out there and recon it first, and then we had to come up with you know, a primary, an alternate, and then a contingency route. We had to throw, you know, you have these convoys, and so you had to throw decoy convoys, because back then, this is in, when was that? This is in 2005, so it was hot over in Afghanistan. But it was crazy because he was so cool under pressure. So he probably would never know this either, because we're not going to show him. We just want to get him to a place and then move him to the next. Well, you know, we were communicating. I always had a rabbit. I called it a rabbit, but it was like my recon guy. So I had, you know, it was a joint billet. So I had an Army staff sergeant and a corporal Marine were in my rabbit. So they were like a step or two ahead of us. And so we were going to this next location, and my staff sergeant calls back to me. He was like, "LT, there was two guys, when they saw us pull up, they took off into the brush. It was like high grass. They took off in high grass and we lost them." I'm like, "What do you mean you lost them?" He was like, "Lou, I don't know where they went." And I'm like, I was like, "All right, well, just keep an eye. You know where we're going, so keep an eye." He was like, "All right, got it." So we're still going. We get there, and they end up staying. The rabbit stayed, and I sent somebody else to be the rabbit because I wanted his information. So he's talking to me, and he was like, "Yeah, they went over that way." So I'm like, "All right." General Petraeus goes in. I'm talking to his exec. I'm like, "Listen, it's about to go down. I don't know for certain, but if I say it's time to go, it's time to go." Right? He was like, "All right." So he's in there. He's talking to whoever he's talking to, key leader in Kabul, and then we're outside, kind of shooting the shit. Then you hear some gunshots go off, and I'm like, "What?" So then you start to hear a lot of them, and so I was like, push forward. So then you have, my detail team. They're pushing forward to where the bullets are coming from, right? And me, a second lieutenant, brand new second lieutenant, I'm running forward too, right? And like we're running into the gunfire, and you can hear like it's whizzing over our head. You can hear it. And so we get, I don't know, probably 50 yards up, and there's probably a wall in the distance. Maybe it was probably about 100 yards away, and we get about 40, 50 yards up, and we got a little bit of cover behind this vehicle that's parked. And I'm next to the staff sergeant. He was like, "LT, what the fuck are you doing here?" He was like, "We got this. You go back to him." And I'm like, "What?" He was like, "This is not your job. You go back to him." And I'm like, all right. So then I run back. They push forward. I run back. I go into the building. I go up in there, and I see General Petraeus. He looks at me because I'm sure my face is telling him everything. And his exec comes over. He's like, "What's up?" I'm like, "We got live rounds outside. I don't know where it's coming from." He was like, "All right." Like he was just like, "All right." And I'm like, "What do you mean, all right, man? Like, it's time to go." He was like, "You let me know if it gets serious." I go back outside, and I'm looking. I can still hear it. I go back in, and I'm like, "Listen, we should take off." General Petraeus came over, and he was like, "LT, are your guys good?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." He was like, "Well, I'm good too then." And he just kept along with his meeting. So like what that taught me though is like being cool under pressure. Like when it's hot, I'm talking about he didn't skip a beat. He didn't sound nervous. No, nothing. No, nothing. Which threw me off. Like I was telling, like I'm all flustered, and I'm, Petraeus was just like nothing. And so I try to keep that with me too, just to kind of like when things get tough, when things feel uncomfortable or whatever, maybe inside, or maybe he's like a duck, and so on top of the water he was just sitting there, but under the water his feet are paddling. I don't know.
Right.
But like to the eye, he just was so cool and calm, and so I took that from him. The next lesson I think I learned was my wife. All right, so it had to be for my wife, and you met my wife, Kim. she is, I call her my pit bull, right? Because she speaks up, she speaks her mind. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. She speaks her mind. Um, and usually that's not me. I try to like be tactful about a lot of stuff and not really give it to you. In the beginning, I didn't really give it to you straight. I would kind of like dance around it, but she's just like right to the point. Whatever. If you're upset about it, it's the truth though. Truth hurts is what she always says. The truth hurts, but she just gives it to you straight. Um, so I think me meeting my wife and seeing her personality in situations, where she has to give those like that honest feedback or the truth, I've definitely picked that up from her, and I'm able to speak more directly to people, and so as I got that from her, I'm also assimilating everything else prior to me being with her, um, loving to be with people, like knowing how to interact. So what I've done, how I've used that is I'm able to just give it to you straight black and white, and then I can still go have a beer with you. You know what I mean? It doesn't change anything. I got to tell you what it is.
Right.
And so it is what it is. Let's move on. I'm still the exact same person. I'm still going to treat you the exact same, but I have to tell you because I care about you.
Right.
And so I've definitely learned that from her. And so like every day I learn stuff. I think those are the real main ones that have helped mold me to the person I am today. Um, but I know they're still coming. I know they're still coming. Hope I answered that question for you.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I did want to hear about though, so you served in a position where you were essentially in charge of um, a human resources type of branch of the Air Force, right?
Oh, oh yeah. Oh, so
So,
I didn't even add that piece. Go ahead.
so what was your role, and what were some of the challenges that you dealt with in that position?
For sure. Okay. Man, I totally forgot about that. That's okay. And this is, and what you're speaking of is, I was the assistant director of equal opportunity. All right. That's that position. Um, so with that position, it's a staff position. It's outside of my normal job. So in order to get that position, when you first get it, you have to go do like tech school basically. And at the time, it was a schoolhouse at Patrick Air Force over near Satellite Beach. The schooling was about 4 months long, and so in that schooling, it's a joint school, so you have all branches there. But in that schooling, you're there and you're inundated with all this information, and basically you're doing a whole lot of case study, a whole lot of research, um, a whole lot of role playing, but it's so much information, and it's so good. And I think that schooling, I mean, you're there in a joint environment. You do a lot of role play, a lot of case study, a lot of research, and the information that you're given, it's so much information, so much that I think that all military members should get, but they don't. Only members in the position get it. Um, but in in that, it talks about all the discriminatory things that take place, that have taken place in history, right? And so it's, to me, it's almost like, the government saying, they did some wrong things, and there's an actual position so that you can kind of not investigate really, but kind of clarify, things that are happening and if and when they did. So, but that school messed me up though, because I was hypersensitive to everything because everything is wrong. If you just, I mean, no kidding. If you just watch TV, it's all wrong. It's all wrong. If you choose to see it, but most people don't want it. They're not really sensitive to a lot of things, and it's just the way it is, and it's always been that way. But a lot of things are just terribly wrong. But anyhow, in that position, what I had to do is, again, I'm going to say investigate, but it's really clarify. I have, when people come into my office, they've been wronged. They felt like they've been wronged. And it's only for discrimination to like five, to race, excuse me, color, religion, national origin, sexual preference, stuff like that, right? So they'd come to me because they perceive that they've been wronged somehow, discriminated against somehow, and I would just have to clarify it. And so with that, we had to go down and get down to the root cause of things. And so as I saw it, so in that position, I did most of the investigative work basically for the commanders. So how it looked was someone come into my office, they tell me, they felt like this person had discriminated against them for example, for being a black man. And so how I always did it was I would first have a conversation with them, right? And I would say, I would read this preamble to them. And so in the preamble, it defined things. It talked about, what discrimination was, what sexual harassment was. And if you start to talk about this stuff, there's no taking it back, right? So I think sometimes what I noticed was happening is that it was a miscommunication. A lot of times it was miscommunication. And so, but because there might be like a personality conflict sometimes, or it was a miscommunication, they felt a certain kind of way without really getting down to it and say, is this really what you meant? Right. And I know that for the most part, like if you ask somebody that and they want to hide it, then they'll say, no, of course not. Right. But if they don't want to hide it, then they'll just tell you straight up, like, yep. And I know that it can go either way. And so I would first tell them, well, have you talked to them about it? And most people say no. And then I would say, well, do you feel comfortable talking to them about it? And so a lot of people would say, no, I don't feel comfortable. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Well, do you think that you have anybody else that could talk to them on your behalf? Most people would say no. That would be an option. I would say, well, how do you feel about writing them a letter? You don't have to talk to them. You can write them a letter. And they would, most people would say no, and I'm fine with that. Okay. And so then I would go forward to say, well, tell me, and you got to be specific because that's how it works. I have to know like what they did, when they did it, and how they did it. You got to like break the W's, the 5 W's. I need all of them and be really, really specific. And so we would have this conversation. I had this packet and I would give it to them to go fill out and think about it and then come back to me filled out, because by me sending them away, I'm not really sending them away, but by me giving them the packet, having that conversation, not challenging them, but challenging them to maybe talk about it with the person, it gives them an opportunity to think about it and to maybe use one of those steps. And so if they felt like they still couldn't do it, then they'd fill the packet out and they'd bring it back to me. And so then we'd go forward. And so, like I was saying, like for me, what I learned in that position is like, I would question myself, like, why is there even a position called the equal opportunity officer? Like, why would there even be a position? Right. And to me, the answer was, the military knows exactly that it's happening. Like, why else would you have it if it wasn't happening?
Right.
Right. So, and so what I noticed though in the position was a lot of times the personnel filling those billets were females or people of color. Now you will have there were white males and there were some white females, but the majority, that's what you saw. And so that was telling for me because those are the ones that I had to fill the most, gender and people of color. And then toward the end, when I was in that role, it started to be some sexual preference as well, which was telling to me. It was very, very interesting. And so as I was doing, these cases or clarifying what they were saying, what I found was it was really hard to prove if someone did it or not. Because there's a lot of, there's a lot of ways to hide your true feelings, or you can disguise discriminating towards somebody a lot of ways. And I don't want to give people away, but there are ways. And so a lot of times,
Well, do you feel that sometimes people have biases, or maybe they're closet racist, but they really don't even believe that they are racist?
it's funny you're saying this because lately I've been having some conversations with some pretty good friends of mine on this very topic. Very, very interesting.
Because I think in my experience, when I've experienced or heard comments or witnessed some form of discrimination, and you try and address it with that individual, they deny. And sometimes it's just like ignorance, pure ignorance. And I mean, I've never been in a position like what you were describing, but I was just wondering if you uh, ever experienced that kind of attitude or mentality.
uh, I mean, 100% for sure.
Okay.
Uh, and so I think ignorance is probably the best word. And so, like I was telling you, like I've literally had this conversation. And so what I say is, again, all these things that help shape the person that I am. And so for me, when I see something like that in my personal life, or even on the professional side, I will address it. And I'm addressing it because I need to educate you, because right now, like, you sound real ignorant, right? That's what I'm thinking in my mind. And so I can talk about it without being emotional as well, or getting, like, like getting mad. I can definitely talk about it. And I feel like if I educate you on it, if I talk to you about it and I tell you, you know, it can be perceived this way, or this is how I viewed what you just did or what you just said. If I'm telling you, like, everything that you did before that, it was whatever because you didn't know, but I just told you. And so at this point, moving forward, if we're here again, now you're doing it because you're choosing to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not ignorant anymore. Like, it's intentional.
Right.
So, 100%, I've seen it. And even after I've said it to some people, I've still seen it afterward too. But then it just as equal though, after a conversation, some people I don't see it again. Now I'm not saying that I'm not saying that they still don't feel that way, but in front of me, I just don't see it.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Okay. Well, one thing that I wanted to that's kind of that's a good segue into one of the things I wanted to talk about with you based on your experiences and your education um, within that role. I've been in the fire service. I started off as a reserve firefighter 23 years ago. I got hired on as a full-time firefighter, and so I've spent 23 years in the fire service, and I would say it's less prevalent now than when I started out. But through conversations and personal experience with with many men and women in the fire service, um, I've gotten the sense that there's still there remains some subtle and sometimes not so subtle forms of racism and misogyny. Um, and I'm talking specifically about the fire service here. Um, what are some of your experiences, or maybe experiences of others that you're aware of that may be more profound than yours?
I can speak on the misogyny thing. I know two good examples. Um, right when you were saying it, like right off the top, I can remember. One of them was when I was actually in that schoolhouse I was telling you about at Patrick, and it was a weekend. I came back and I went to the fire station at the time. I was at 71. I went to 71, and I would just come by to just say what's up to the guys. And we had a rookie. It was a female rookie, and we were all in the kitchen, just kind of hanging out, just catching up. And the female rookie was doing the dishes, and it is what it is. Rookies, that's their duty. They're doing whatever. And I can't remember what we were talking about, but someone made a comment about females, something about something about females, right? And everybody thought it was so funny, right? But again, I'm hypersensitive right now, right? I told you I'm in that school, and so I'm looking at them, and then I turned and I looked at her, and like she don't say nothing. And again, so she's a rookie, so I know that she's not gonna say anything. But I stopped though, and I was like, I mean, she's standing right there, right? Like she's right there. And they were like, what? And I'm just like, what do you mean what? Like you said, blah, blah, blah. And she's standing right here. That's terrible. And so, again, I don't remember exactly what was said, but I clearly remember that incident. And there was another one, there was another guy when I was at Station 50. And this guy, I don't know if it was a guy, but it was guys. I would say guys. They would always, not always, but they would say sometimes about how females in the job, like sometimes they felt like the job required you to be strong, right? And so I would always say to them, listen, whatever the standard is, right? Draw up the standard, whatever it is, because you have to have a standard, whatever it is. If the standard is here and the female meets that standard, they're good to go for me, right? They're good to go for me. And I'll tell you this too. There's a lot of guys that I would I would much rather go with this girl over here than this guy.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So I'm just like, you can't just generalize stuff like that. And I'm like, what's gonna end up happening is when you make lieutenant, you're gonna have a lot of females on your crew. And what happened? One of the guys made lieutenant. Sure enough, he had females on his crew. But then it changed him for the good though.
That's good.
Yeah. Now, we're talking about like discriminatory stuff, like
Yeah,
racial stuff.
yeah. I mean, because I'm sure at the firehouse there has been a lot of discussion about Black Lives Matter, racism that is, the racial targeting certain police officers or law enforcement officers. You know, I would imagine that it has been a topic around the kitchen table.
For sure, for sure. Um, and so a huge one is, just because the climate is how it is right now nationally, right? So definitely those conversations come up. And police officers are our brothers, right? So we run with
Yeah,
them a lot. I have a lot of respect for them. That being said, though, I also see what right looks like. I know what right looks like, and I know what wrong looks like too.
right,
And so the stuff that we see on TV, to me, a lot of times it's wrong. But what I will say is a lot of times I really can't make a judgment because we only see part of the picture too.
right,
And I can attest to that. You can only see part of the picture. You don't see the whole thing. You're not there in the moment. I get all of that. Um, and so, but in those conversations around the kitchen table, like some of these people, and again, to me, it's ignorant. They make so many ignorant comments. Um, and 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 what I really can't stand is once once someone, let's just say that once someone gets shot or they pass away, right? Then they start to talk about the person's history so that I guess it justifies the action. And so but the people talking about it at the station, like they're eating that thing up, and I'm like, I don't even it what they did prior to that moment, I mean, prior to that day, doesn't even matter.
right.
Has has nothing to do with anything, right? We're talking about the situation that they were in and what ended up happening. Um, so that bothers me a lot. Um, and again, it's all ignorance. It's all ignorance. And another big one that I hear a lot, I'm not sure if you've ever heard this, is about um, the Civil Rights Act. Excuse me, how they say that being a black or being a minority or having the trifecta, they call it the trifecta. This is coming out of somebody's mouth. The trifecta being a black female and she's gay. Like that's the trifecta.
Right.
And I'm like, what? Like that person's going to be a chief. And I'm like, man, like what are you even talking about?
Yeah.
How do you even have a conversation with somebody who says that? You know what I'm saying? And so now again, I feel obligated, like I gotta have this conversation with you because I have no idea what you're talking about right
Right.
now. I hear it all the time.
So one of the things that, I mean, because we're talking about leadership here,
Right,
and if we're being specific about the firehouse, there's somebody at that station that sets the tone, and typically it's the company officer.
right.
If they're a strong company officer, sometimes it's the engineer or the senior firefighter.
Yep, yep.
Um, but there's somebody there that is setting the tone. They are either nipping things like that in the bud and having a candid conversation and attempting to educate the people around the table or the people on the crew.
Right,
Um, and I would say it's the foundation of effective leadership is effective communication. Being able to communicate with those people on your crew, and by communicate I mean, you're doing a lot more listening than talking. you have to listen to get to know them, know their background, that sort of thing. Um, and getting to know them, you learn how best to communicate with them, how
Right.
best to educate them. So, but even if you're brand new, if you're the brand new leader of that group, there's still a responsibility to nip that sort of thing in the bud. Um, and I would say, by and large, and I meant to look up the numbers on the census, um, but there is, the fire service in the United States is predominantly white male. In your department, it's predominantly a white male.
Right.
Um, and I'm sure there's been times where you're you are the only black guy on the crew.
Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah. Now, when conversations like just anything racial, any type of racial discrimination, when there's conversations where there are ignorant views being expressed, you have the knowledge and the skills at communicating to be able to educate those individuals. If there's a lieutenant there, it really should be them that addresses it. If you have, uh, and what I'm going for right here, and I'm stammering a little bit, is if there is a white lieutenant and the rest of the crew is white and there's one black guy
Hmm.
or any minority group, um, and there is some ignorant views being expressed, is there some advice that you could give to that company officer on how to address that type of situation?
So that's going to be tricky, and the reason why I say that it's tricky is because, I'm going to be guessing what you're trying to get at, and so I think what you're getting at is because of that minority is there by himself or herself and having to deal with this conversation because it's being brought up by somebody. Like, how should that company officer proceed or navigate or facilitate this? And I'm saying that it's tricky because, so for example, if I was that one minority, I would feel totally fine. Like, I can have a conversation with all y'all. It's not whatever. Like, y'all want to talk about it, let's talk,
Right.
right? And so I'm totally comfortable in it because I've been doing it for a long time, right? But let's just say I wasn't comfortable for whatever reason. I'm new, right? That
You
Let's
would,
just say that I'm new,
okay. But
and
as,
so
as a new guy, you would be looking at the company officer to
for
intervene.
help,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what I'm saying. Like, it's you have to know your crew, right? And so even as the new person, as the company officer, like on the first day, you got to sit down with the new person and have a conversation. Give your expectations. You want to get a feel from that person. You can tell a lot just by having a conversation, how they speak, how they carry themselves, the whole nine. Like, in the morning time, what time they got there. You can pick up a lot by one talking and by two just observing. And so in that moment, you have a couple of choices. So as the company officer, you can just be like, nope, we're not going there. You can shut it down before it even gets started. That can be one thing. Or if you're the company officer too, again, it has to be that comfortability for that individual, because if he does allow it to go there and we just talk, um, I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with it, but things can go hard right real fast, right? And so you're opening yourself up for that if you don't shut it down too.
Right.
So if it starts to go to a place where you don't want it to go, you got to shut it down there too, or shut it down there. And so I don't think I don't think there's anything wrong with having the conversation. And some people feel differently. But again, and this is all my viewpoint, like I feel like I'm obligated to educate people when I hear ignorant stuff. And so as long as you're able to be even keel about it and not get emotional and be able to articulate yourself, I feel good about it. If I'm the company officer, I feel good about it. But you have to be comfortable facilitating this conversation though. And so not everybody's equipped to do it. So you got to know yourself. So it's a difficult conversation. I mean, it's a difficult answer to give you. I'm not being real, straight about that answer because it all depends on who that person is or persons, really.
Well, just like with anything, when you're the person in charge, there's going to be individuals on the crew that may be better versed in a particular skill set than you.
Right. Yeah.
But the expectation is that you're going to work very hard at getting better at whatever skill set you're weak in. And if you're a company officer that is, well, I mean, a lot of times we don't know what we don't know.
That's right.
And one of the things that was very eye-opening for me, and it was profound, was, and I don't even know if somebody shared it with me or if I just happened upon it. I came across the Gray Challenge, and my daughter and I watched a lot of the documentaries, and I consider myself to be pretty well versed in history, but there were so many things that I was just completely ignorant to. I feel like had I been aware years ago, I would have been a better company officer. I would have been a better firefighter, just a better human being.
Right.
I think is just the leadership aspect of it, the emotional intelligence that is required to be a good leader, and the being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, be empathetic to their views, to their experiences,
Right.
and without that ability, you're really limiting your own personal growth as a leader. So,
Mm.
one thing that I would say to anybody listening is, if you haven't already, Google the Gray Challenge and commit to learning, to reducing as much ignorance as possible. And then with that knowledge, you're armed with the ability to challenge others.
Right.
So talking about the company officer's role in setting the tone at the station, and really nailing down that individual's responsibility to ensure there is limited ignorance, not just with the knowledge of the job and the skills that are required to conduct yourself as a professional firefighter or EMS provider, but to actually limit the ignorance on social issues. So if you have an individual on your crew that is harboring, some racist or sexist uh, views, these prejudices that, a lot of people keep that kind of stuff hidden. But if they, open themselves up a little bit, and, you're made aware of these views, I mean, it is your responsibility to ensure there is some education going on. So just like if the individual doesn't know how to, probationary firefighter doesn't know how to operate the jaws of life efficiently, or the hydraulic cutters efficiently. You're going to train on that. You're going to educate them. You're going to coach them and make sure that they're proficient, that, you don't have to stand over their shoulder on the next emergency, you know. Just like that, you've got to educate them on just how important it is to limit that sort of ignorance. How, when you're serving the community, you're going to interact with people from all walks of life. And as a firefighter, as a paramedic, as an EMT, it's not your job to judge them. It's your job to serve them. It's your job to take care of them. And any prejudices that you might have, you had better just leave them in your closet at home.
Yeah, I agree with that. So this is what I know. I know that people get socialized, in life coming up, right? And so an example of that would be, let's just say, my dad was in the military, like I told you before, and so we spent a lot of time in Texas, okay? And so let's say when I was growing up in Austin and in San Antonio, I would get into fights all the time with Hispanic guys. Like every day after school, this is just an example, it didn't really happen, but every day after school, I'd walk home from school and I'd get jumped. I get jumped by some Hispanic guys, right? So that's me being socialized, having to fight Spanish guys. They're going to jump me. So as I grow up to be a man, now I'm walking down the street with me. It's me and my girl, right? We're walking down the street, and a group of Hispanic guys are walking on the same side of the street. I'm going to feel a certain kind of way, which might have me cross the street, which might have me go into a store until they pass by. You know what I mean? It just is what it is. And so I say that example to you because, just like you said, as a firefighter, we're here to serve the public. And so, like I said to you before, I was at Station 50, that demographic, right? It's downtown Orlando. And it's socioeconomically, it's on the lower side. And so I'm not going to say a lot of times, but sometimes you'll have crew members, not treat the people, like they're supposed to. And so I think part of that is because they don't feel comfortable in that. And I think sometimes it's them judging them because of the prejudices, because of the how they were socialized or whatever. It has them treat, the public a certain kind of way, which, again, sometimes it's just not acceptable. And I've had to say something on a number of occasions about it. Sometimes the lieutenant says nothing, and so other times the lieutenant steps in and corrects it as well. I've seen both ways. And so I had to do it sometimes, and sometimes I didn't necessarily have to because, the lieutenant did. And so as I speak to the crew members, though, I'd reiterate to them, like, some of these people that you see on the street, they're one bad decision away, or they're one bad decision which forced them to be where they are. You know what I'm saying? And so I tell them all the time, like, in my life, I mean, I don't know if you're religious or whatever, whoever you believe in, but I know for sure God was looking out for me, because I have been given so many chances and so many passes, if you will. Like, he has something in store for me. Like, there's a bigger purpose in my life, because I've been saved plenty of times, which I'm very thankful for that. But I tell these members, like, they're not that far off from you, man. One bad decision away that you got to pass on, and that person didn't. That's it. So just treat them like you would treat your mom or your sister. It should be the same way. And so if they're calling us, it's already a bad day for them. And it's not for you to decide if it's important or not. It's whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I before we go, I would like to, because this podcast is titled "From Embers to Excellence," and one of the best ways to grow is to fail and recover. And so I would like you to share, if you're comfortable with it, what's maybe your biggest failure, whether it's professional or personally, but a failure that was significant where you learned a valuable lesson. It shaped who you are, something that you recovered from, and just maybe how others could possibly be better for having listened to your experience and your lesson.
So this is it's pretty intimate, right? This question. So I think my biggest failure, it's on the personal side, but it's intertwined with professional. It is, maybe I can just tell the story and then I can bring it back around. But so a few years back, I decided to go to paramedic school. All right. Well, even before then, I'm trying to pinpoint exactly when this was, but I feel like it has some residual. So I've been deployed 3 times. Let's start here. I've been deployed 3 times. Two were Oconus, which is over the water, and 1 was stateside. And I know that each deployment has affected me mentally and emotionally, right? And so in the beginning, I kind of just suppressed it. I held it in, and I dealt with it however I dealt with it. And so a few years back, I get deployed. I come back, and I know that I'm different. My relationship with my wife is different, and my kids is different. And then right after that, I decided to go to paramedic school. And so for the people who don't know what paramedic school looks like, it's a year of your life, and I mean you're on the go all the time, not really home. And when you're home, you're not really present because you got a whole lot of stuff to get done. Just extremely, extremely busy, especially with the firefighter shift. So I'm working for 24. I have class the following day. The following day, I have some kind of a ride along or some kind of a clinical that I have to do. And so my wife and I, we foster. And so during that time, we had some foster kids. And, every foster kid, has, their traumatic events that have taken place in their lives. And so they're affected some way. And so they come to your house with baggage.
And we'll pause right there for a second. You have your own children as well.
I do. I have 3 of my own. And most of the time we have 2 beds. So we normally take in 2 foster kids. So usually it's about 5 kids in my house. So my house is always humming.
Right.
Yeah. And so you make a good point. Like my life is already busy. Right. And so that's just me being at home with my family, not even adding in my fire job plus my reserve job. And now I've added on some schooling on top of that. And so my biggest failure is trying to do too much. I have a hard time saying no, right? So people in my life have, for whatever reason, they see something in me and they want me to get these things, these certificates, these acts, whatever, to help me get to another level, because they see me being somewhere else than where I currently am. And so I have a hard time saying no, I can't take on more stuff. And so I took it on, this paramedic school. And so because of that, during that year, it was a really, really rough year, not only for me with paramedic school, but then also for my family and my foster kids. And so I mean, not to get really into it, but it was just a really difficult year for my family. Right. And so I would say we're in 2020 now. That was in 2017 to 18. And my family, we're getting to it. We're at a place now that we're good. But it's taken 2 years for us to get there. And it was all because I was being selfish, one, but also, again, I've learned to just say no to some things. And I feel like timing is everything. And so it was just the wrong time. And
Well, can you identify a specific failure that
yes. And so I guess I didn't articulate that. So my biggest failure is like you said, like I said, I have 2 foster kids, right? I have 3 kids. I'm married. And so my wife and I, we're in this together. We're a team. We talked about it. We're a team. We do it all together. And so I failed her in not being around, like physically being there to help. I literally was not around that year. That was my biggest failure. And so, like, how I always make moves, and I think you know this now, like I use a Google Calendar, right? My wife and I, we plan things on our phone, a calendar. And so if my friends want to hang out, I'd be like, let me check my calendar. It's a huge joke to all my friends, right? I'm sure you know about it. I'm like, let me check my calendar first, right? And so like I know now, if your family life is not good to go, everything else in your life is gonna fall. I promise you. I promise you. So that is my biggest failure. That I think I'm trying to get to a place, and I think I'm doing a way better than what I was, and I'm still not all the way there, but I'm definitely at a better place.
well, how did you recover from that, and how could you have avoided it in the first place? Just not gone to paramedic school?
Not going to paramedic school.
Okay.
So
And well, you said something else as well. Like when you came back from your deployment, emotionally, you were carrying some baggage as well.
yeah, so I think what I could have done differently is gone to seek counseling. And so I've tried counseling before, but I really don't like doing it. I can't stand it. It's too, I don't know if they want to talk about feelings, and I didn't grow up talking about feelings in my house. That's just something we didn't do. Like my parents had 4 boys. There wasn't a lot of talking about your feelings. You know what I'm saying? Um, and so it's just uncomfortable for me. So I think what I could do, I should be going to get counseling. I know that I've suppressed tons of stuff. It's all inside. And so sometimes I'll let things go, and then I blow up, right? And that's not how that's supposed to look. So I know that's for sure. That's one thing I could do differently. If I could play it all back again, I wouldn't have gone to paramedic school. Not at that time. I think I learned a lot of great information, and I'm better for it. But I wouldn't have chosen that time frame to go.
So one thing you touched on the counseling. Um, I'm actually going to be interviewing a couple of mental health counselors over the next several weeks. One of them, well, both of them are specialists in PTSD, specifically with public safety professionals. One, well, I'm sure you'll watch the episodes or listen to them.
Yeah.
But there's so many different therapies out there that really don't involve any discussion of feelings. I have personal experience with it. I feel much the same way you do about opening up emotionally. But there came a point when I realized that a huge part of being effective as a leader is being effective as a self leader, which includes taking care of yourself, being aware of where you're at mentally and physically. And if you don't maintain a certain level of mental and physical fitness, you're not as effective leading others. If you can't lead yourself, it's hard to lead other people. So I did my due diligence, and I sought out some effective treatments. And one, there's hypnotherapy, there's immersion therapy, EMDR. EMDR is, from my experience, very effective. Um, so one of the things that I'll be doing when I interview these individuals is we'll be talking about PTSD and the effects that it has, maybe some sources of that trauma and effective treatments. And I'll be posting links to resources that are available. Um, so it's kind of cool that we touched on that. But yeah, man, I really appreciate you sharing that stuff, and I know that you seem a lot happier than you did several years ago.
Good. That's good that you can see.
Yeah,
I was in a place. There was a time frame. I was in a place
well,
for
that
sure.
was you were at Station 50 at that time too, weren't you?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a meat grinder,
Yeah.
and you see, I'm sure it just added more to
It
whatever
did.
baggage you were carrying.
Yeah, I know for sure it did, which is part of the reason why I had to leave that house. As much as I loved that first dude, what got me after I left was my daughter. I made the choice, but my daughter made an observation to me. At the time, she was like 7 years old or something. She said, "Daddy, you're not grumpy anymore." And I was like, "So
Yeah,
what do you mean? Like I was grumpy all the time before?" Like that, it spoke to me. So I know during that time, we were running all those calls after midnight, don't really sleep. And then I'm supposed to be up and at it the next day because now it's family time, but I'm tired, you know, and I'm already going through some stuff. It was a lot. It was a lot.
yeah. Oh man, thank you so much for letting me interview you. I think we covered a lot of really valuable stuff, a lot of really poignant perspectives. It's just I really appreciate you sharing everything that you did.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you actually inviting me on. This is my first podcast being interviewed. It's kind of awkward, but kind of cool.
Cool, man. Thank you for listening to this episode of From Embers to Excellence with Dave Hollenbach. Please visit hollenbachleadership.com for additional content. My goal is to add value to as many people as possible, so if I can be of any assistance to you or someone you know, please connect with me via email or on one of my social media accounts linked on the homepage of my website. Remember, our failures don't define us unless we let them, and the only true measure of a leader is the success of their team.